Hello, and welcome to Nostalgia Marcana. I'm your host, Doug Leaf. Each episode of this podcast, we'll look back on the movies, TV, games, people, and phenomena that we still love talking about all these years later, and ask ourselves why these bits of pop culture still enchant us today. This week, we'll be revisiting A Baby's Gotta Do What a Baby's Gotta Do. This week we are talking about Rugrats, the second in the triumvirate of the Nicktoons that we've covered for this show. We previously did Ren and Stimpy, and that leaves this one. And at some point we're going to have to do Doug, but we'll save that for another day. I'm really excited to talk about this. It was fun to revisit this as a parent now, having two children of my own. So I'm really excited that we have a great guest on who suggested this topic. He is a writer, a comedian, and the host of the House of House podcast. You can find his good works at andrewtavin.com. Please welcome Andrew Tavin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Andrew, tell me why you wanted to focus on Rugrats today, because I've not gone back to this in a while. It was a pleasure to revisit.
Yeah, so I hadn't seen it in a while either. I grew up, this was, we were a real Nicktoons household, and I think until SpongeBob came out, Rugrats was probably, as a little kid, like one of my favorite shows. I think SpongeBob displaced it a bit, where before I got super into, so my dad, we watched The Simpsons. My dad would watch like every episode, and we were allowed to watch it. We weren't allowed to watch Friends. I had a friend who wasn't allowed to watch Simpsons, but he was allowed to watch Friends. Parents just come up with whatever. I mean, it's really what the parents watch, right? If they watch something, they think it's okay or not okay. But I think that, one of the first things I think of, just because we know each other through, we're both listeners and supporters of the Duck Feed podcast network, and I've heard one of the hosts, Gary, will occasionally refer to like Rugrats humor, like very derisively. And so I hadn't seen it in a while, but whenever I'd hear him say that, I was always thinking like, man, as a kid, I really liked Rugrats. And going back, there is a decent amount of like, oh, it's instead of saying, I mean, in this one, for example, in like one of the ones that you chose, like the meaning of Hanukkah instead of the meaning of Hanukkah. Or just like, I'm trying to think. There was one example that really stuck out to me where you're like, it's as someone might say, a little cringeworthy to watch as an adult. Where you're like, oh, these are like such ridiculous kind of baby misspeakings where it just feels very forced at times. But I do think that there is still a lot of, a bit more interesting humor to look back at. Like, I mean, I remember, it wasn't in one of these episodes, but I still remember one of the jokes that's clearly, there for a little something for the adults when it's in the room. But where they say, like, you left the kids with Grandpa? The man slept through Pearl Harbor. And he goes, I sounded the alarm as soon as I woke up. Which is, like, that's fun. There was one where, like, it cuts to outside because there's some family fight or something. And you see it goes through, like, fall, the leaves come down, and snow, and then it melts, and it's spring, and then the sun's out. And then Drew or whatever comes to the door, and he's like, wow, crazy weather this week, huh? And that's like, I mean, that's almost like ripped off from a Simpsons joke. Like when they do one of the jokes with like, Abrams and flipping all the pages and the clock goes by. And Zucker. Okay, great. Abrams and Zucker are that's the creators of Airplane, but whatever they say are the two biggest gossips in town. Like the fake out time pass jokes. Simpsons has done like at least 4 versions of those. So there is stuff I think that's more for adults. So it was interesting revisiting it and seeing if there was anything that held up from a show that I enjoyed a lot when I was like, I don't know, 6.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned The Simpsons because the team that,
of course,
Klasky Supo, I think is how you pronounce it. That team worked on the very early season. I think the first season of The Simpsons.
I think it was only the first season, but yeah, it's back when. I mean, I have a certain affection, I think, for that, kind of uglier, quote unquote uglier. I mean, I think it looks better than a lot of the modern, really smoothed out kind of. Everything sort of looks like it could be a commercial animation to some degree. Not to, there's some really cool. It's always weird when there's so much stuff out there. There's some not so great looking animation to me. There's also the most beautiful animation that's ever existed on, some Paramount Plus straight to streaming shit. There's so much stuff out there, I'm sure. So.
Right. I my nostalgic memories of Rugrats. I'm not sure when were you born?
I was born in 1991.
Okay, so I'm born in 1980. So we have very different, frames of reference for this show. So I was 11 when this came out, and it came out alongside the other 2 Nicktoons, which I must admit grabbed me more, partially because Ren and Stimpy is fucking wild, and go back to our episode on that. That was my favorite, and then because I was an 11-year-old named Doug.
There you go.
It was going to have to work real hard to not be up there for me. So Rugrats, took the bronze, but that's not to denigrate it. That's just how it ranked for me, because it wasn't a bad show, and I always enjoyed watching it. And I think that was a testament to the quality of the show, really, because when you're a kid, there's probably nothing worse than being told you're a baby or you're acting like a baby.
Yeah.
Like, that's for babies. And so to do an entire show that was about babies and still have it be kind of compelling was pretty impressive. And this animation house, I know they had done commercials in the past. They worked on this. They also worked on Doug. Yeah. And they would go on to do other stuff, and they're capable of adult shit because they eventually went on to do Duckman, which I want to do an episode about as well. That is much more adult than this. But there is that feeling that you get from this sort of weird animation. I read one of the animators talked about we didn't want to make the babies cute, we wanted to make them look weird, and mission accomplished.
I mean, it's, they're, when you really look at them, I mean, you kind of get used to it, but, I don't know, just Tommy in particular is, very off-putting. He's, gangly, and he's got, to some degree, all babies have kind of old man head, but he's got, this, it's not quite like Arnold, Hey Arnold, shape, but he's got, pretty, smushy head shape. They didn't put they were probably supposed to give him one of those little baby helmets they give to the babies who have the wrong shaped heads, and I guess they just didn't have that back then.
Yeah, and Phil and Lil have very beady eyes that are kind of creepy. But I noticed that I think from the baby's perspective on the show, it feels like the adults are aliens a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think from the audience perspective, the babies also there's some kind of distance between you and them. They're not quite human themselves. They're sort of weird.
I think a couple things thinking about what was appealing to me. I mean, one is that I think I was very much that sort of very imaginative kid. I mean, everyone did. I don't know why I'm acting like this is unique. You know how most kids are really boring and just read manuals for electric sanders? Well, I like to imagine I was in a magical world, so I was pretty unique. But I legit would. I mean, this is maybe a little embarrassing to admit, but I don't know. This was when I was younger than 10. I would legit. I don't know. I would think about I played a lot of Nintendo. I was a Nintendo kid, and starting with Game Boy, and then the handhelds, and then had GameCube. that was a little later, but I would like, I don't know, we'd go to like a museum or something, or we'd go to like a, some family trip or to Colonial Williamsburg, whatever. I think of it like, oh, I like imagining it as like, oh, this is like a location, and like, what if this museum was like a Zelda dungeon or something, and just sort of overlaying this other, fantasy on top of the reality at the same time was just something I kind of did, and I think that sort of resonates with me. The other thing is, I mean, I was born in New York, but we actually grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then Memphis, Tennessee, and seeing a very Jewish character, both the holiday specials, but then of like their grandparents, Boris and Minka, who like Boris reminds me so much of my late grandfather that like it's very funny that there was some controversy, I think, when he came out, that was like, oh, is this an anti-Semitic caricature or something? It's like, no, that's just my grandpa. Like, I don't like, it's there's a joke, and there's a joke in the Passover episode where he goes, oh, have you seen the Kinderlach? And she says, oh, they're in the fridge. And he goes, no, the Kinderlach, not the Knedelach, which is just, I mean, that's not just for like an adult. That's for like a Yiddish speaking out. That's for like probably whoever.
1% of the population, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tiny, number of people. There's one in the, I didn't know this until I saw Reddit. I really liked it. There's a, in the Hanukkah episode, in one of the, the flashbacks, I mean, whatever, the story that implies that the babies were remembering actually being in ancient Judea. But there's like a store with Moel, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, like the person who performs the circumcision, spelled out in Hebrew. So clearly getting past the censors, I guess, assuming that'd be an issue. And then it says cut rate deal or something on the front of it, which is like, I mean, it's not quite Chuck Sneed and formerly Chuck's or whatever, Sneed and Feed from The Simpsons sneaky joke, but that's a pretty adult joke snuck in, to this kids show.
And again, an adult joke for specifically, Jews who we are a small but mighty chunk of the population.
Yeah.
And I that certainly resonated with me. Like there were no Jewish characters on TV that were like this, where it's way in the background. It's not mentioned at all, except when you see, like you said, Boris and Minka, who are very, very Yiddish in the way they talk. But yeah, you get those Passover and Hanukkah episodes where they're like, yeah, we're just going to tell this story because Tommy Pickles and his cousin Angelica are Jewish. So,
well, Tommy is. Angelica, I mean,
she's half, right?
No, I mean, okay, so I'm not going to gatekeep anyone, because I growing up, very much, I grew up religious, and there was very much the like, well, if you're, if your dad's Jewish, then it doesn't count at all. If your mom's Jewish, you're fully Jewish. I don't personally feel that way. I think, obviously, it's, an ethno-religious thing. I'm not gatekeeping anyone. In this specific instance, I only mention it because Drew is Stu's brother. Right. Stu is not Jewish. Drew is married to, God, I forget the name of Angelica's mom, the high power. Charlotte, who I don't know if they say one way or another, but I'm pretty sure is not. She's certainly coded as kind of like a waspy, high-powered executive lady. So neither of Angelica's parents are Jewish. If that's how she chooses to identify herself, because she has that heritage, through marriage, I'm not judging her. I didn't see the all grown up episode where she wants I don't know, I'm making this up, but you could imagine one where she wants a bat mitzvah or something because she's jealous of someone else.
Yeah, for sure she would want a bat mitzvah if she was 100% not Jewish.
I mean, she would want a quinceañera if she gets presents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Tommy is, and Dill then, but technically, not the other babies don't have that heritage. They also had, I mean, it's very interesting when you think about the way that people talk, not to make it like too much about this, where they go like, oh, nowadays there's so much forced diversity and they try and pack all this extra diversity, everything. And you look at a show like Rugrats, and I mean, they would say the same thing about it now, but there was, I think, less of a culture war thing about, like, yes, obviously, other issues where, if they had a gay baby on the Rugrats, people would have fucking lost their minds and burnt down Nick Studios Orlando or whatever. But like, they were like, oh, hey, here's here's a black baby, and they are gonna celebrate Kwanzaa in this episode, and you know what, why don't we have Kimmy is I don't know if they ever clarified, but Vietnamese or whatever, and now he's marrying, and we there's so many kinds of people out in the world, we should show kids all of them, and there was just like, maybe I'm misremembering, and like I said, people got certainly worked up about other stuff, but I feel like that was just sort of the expectation that you would have these diverse, and not to say that so it was perfect, but like it just was sort of like, yeah, you're gonna have a diverse cast of babies, or try and have more and teach kids about stuff, because like, why not? That's interesting. Like,
yeah, I mean, you're talking about, there's a very different culture between now and the 90s, but like, yeah, in the 90s it would have been like, oh, something different, how interesting, and now it's like, this shit again, weirdos, and like, it's awful, because we live in nightmare times. But like, sort of getting back just to the like the core of Rugrats, which is really, this kids say the darndest thing stuff about them misunderstanding the world. I think at the time I thought like, oh well, it's cute and all that, they like you said, there's lots of malapropisms and they're confused about what things are. Now that I've had 2 kids, that shit tracks.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They do that stuff all the time. They're constantly asking me, especially, my 4-year-old at this point, a lot of like, he asked me nothing but etymology questions that I just cannot answer. Why is this called a that? I have no idea why that's the word for it. Probably some part of Europe invaded another part of Europe and their words got mushed together. That's why, but I don't actually know. So that is how they experience the world. It's a lot of misunderstandings for them, and it is a confusing, strange place.
Yeah, there's a man, I wish I could remember now that I'm trying to think. There's a I'm blanking on it, but there's some instance that I remember reading about recently where like and it's weird that I can't remember because it's a super common phrase, but it's like the only instance where it's used this way. Okay, I'm not gonna like ramble about something I don't remember, but yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a big reason why my parents did, more so than a lot of other shows. I think they could watch it with us. I mean, we went to go see the movie. They wouldn't have dropped us off alone. Like, I'm sure for the kind of stuff, we made him take us to see the Pokemon movie or the Power Rangers. I mean, my Zadie was when he took me to see the Power Rangers movie. I mean, that kind of stuff, I think, was
That's
probably...
Grandpa for you Goyim out there.
Yes, that's Grandpa. I think that it was probably unwatchable for them, that stuff. But the Rugrats movie, I feel like, was probably like, all right, well, this is something, I mean, it's funny because one of the episodes that we reviewed is where they go to the movies and the parents take the kids to see like the sad bears in Happy Land or whatever, it is. And the whole thing with Grandpa, I think, being sort of the voice of the parents going like, oh, this garbage, like this is so, I can't believe I'm sitting here watching this. And kind of fun, I think humorously, the other parent, the rest of the parents are all like transfixed by it.
That is absolutely true to life, because like, again, as a parent, I am called upon to watch a lot of kids' media.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of it is like unwatchable garbage for sure. But like lately, our house has been way obsessed with Gravity Falls.
Oh yeah, and that's a great show. Like
it is.
I watched most of I don't think I've seen it all, but I watched like most of Gravity Falls like in my, I don't know, sophomore year of college, I think, because it's just like, it's not, obviously it's not like, you're watching Rick and Morty where they're just going to be like, burp, summer, my dick's stuck in a wall or whatever, because it is meant to be watched by kids, but it's just good. Like, it's just a good, funny show. And yeah, this is the kind of thing, and you could probably weigh in on this, but I feel, because my dream would be, if and when we have kids, to kind of, because my understanding, I know, I mean, from interacting, I've interacted with kids quite a lot, and that I know they want to watch the same things over and over again, and I have this probably delusion that you can kind of steer them towards something tolerable, because it does feel weird where kids will like something almost regardless of quality a lot of the time. So it almost feels like you said, they'd watch Gravity Falls, and sometimes they'd also watch something and you'd be like, this is bad. Like, why? Like, can't, because it takes a while. And I do remember growing up having to hit a certain point where I think I just literally, like, I used to watch, like, when I was, like, 7, like, a little old for it. Like, I'd watch, like, Blue's Clues or whatever. I'd watch, like, but then, like, Rugrats. I'd watch, like, anything. And then, like, I think it takes a certain level of development before you kind of start realizing some things are good and some things are bad. I remember when I started thinking like, oh, that movie was bad. Like just before, like I saw a movie, you know. I mean, I do remember, yeah.
No, you're right. I'm smiling and nodding here because to some degree, you can nudge them towards things.
Yeah.
But if they don't want to watch something, like they will freak the fuck out.
Sure,
like
sure.
They're like, no, please don't make me watch this thing. And to a kid, from what I can tell from they obviously they can't discern great storytelling from bad storytelling.
Sure.
They'll be compelled by it. They won't know why.
Yeah.
But like the only sin that they really care about is something is either scary or it's boring.
Yeah.
One of those two things will send them like, nope, I don't want it. It's I don't want to watch this. It's dumb. It's boring. Even if it's something that I know is very, very good.
Sure.
It's like, damn it, can we just watch Back to the Future or The Goonies?
Yeah.
You're going to love this.
No,
and
I promise
no,
you,
it's bad.
The Irishman isn't just another gangster film. It all comes together. It's about Scorsese dealing with mortality and aging. It's only 3.5 hours. Just sit down.
Yeah. So it is hard to do that. And in that episode where the Rugrats go to the movies, like, yeah, it's fun to watch the parents like become enraptured in this sort of like a Care Bears type movie that they're watching. And the kids are all off trying to find a Reptar movie, which is this world's facsimile of Godzilla.
Yeah.
To watch instead. And they just keep getting into hijinks as they wander through the theater and like, wreck all of the concessions and the projectors and stuff. We haven't really talked about the characters too much. Do you have a character out of this group that is a favorite?
I mean, I think Tommy was always my favorite. Part of it, I think, was him, being Jewish.
So, the people repaired their temple, but the Greeks had left only enough oil to burn in the menorah for one night.
But they lit the menorah anyway.
What are we gonna do? It'll take 8 days to make more oil.
What they needed was a miracle.
Yeah, a miracle, whatever that is. That's when something good happens that you thought could never happen. Well, that'll never happen.
Growing up in the South, you just don't... It felt like... I mean, we actually lived, because we were religious, we lived among the Jewish community in Charlotte, which is pretty small. I mean, it's like 50% Lubavitchers by volume who all ended up, like, moving there because, like, one was sent by the Rebbe, and then, like, the Rebbe died. And, well, if you believe that. And then they all, like, a bunch got sent there, and then they married. So there's, like, 5 Lubavitch families in Charlotte, which is a larger amount than you normally have serving a community of that size. And there was a school there we went to that was run by Lubavitch. And so I think I definitely most related to him. One reason I chose the Flowers for Algernon episode where Chucky gets the ability to smell is because I always think of that episode, like, in particular, if I have, like, a cold or something, and if I sort of, for me, a lot of times, when I'm starting to recover during the day, I might actually feel better, and then, like, it starts to get to the evening, and I feel like I'm like, oh, no, it's happening. Yeah, so that's one thing I think about. I also, because that episode is seared in my brain, because the part where Chucky sneezes and the Foley of that kid getting, like, soldier ants biting his ass. That, like, crunch sound is just absolutely locked into place in my brain as just one of those, like, things I remember. You mentioned Ren and Stimpy. One reason I remember I'd watch a little Ren and Stimpy, but I might have been too young for it. I remember there's one where one of them gets their skin pulled off, and I could never. I was like, this is too much for me. I can't do this.
One episode where they get their skin pulled
Well,
off.
well, then I stopped. So
yeah,
I was like,
you should see the one where Ren gets his teeth pulled out. Jesus Christ, that's some
just
body
it's
horror.
the kind of thing that I just can't manage with that. But do you have a preferred baby from either when you watch it occasionally or from just watching it now?
I think probably Chucky Fenster.
Yeah,
would be the one I gravitated towards the most because he was the nerd.
Yeah,
he was the fraidy cat. Like I felt like he had a much more distinctive personality in some ways than some of the others. So I really liked him. I like his voice actor, Christine Cavanaugh.
Yeah,
she was in so much stuff that I watched at the time. Like there's a couple alums here from Darkwing Duck. She's one of them. She plays Goslin on that show, Darkwing Duck's daughter, and so like her voice is absolutely unmistakable. The second you hear it, it's like, oh yeah, that voice was probably in 20 different cartoons I watched as a kid. She's so great.
I mean, certain people, it is something that kind of. I mean, I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I don't want to talk too much because it bummed me out. I think when I talk too much about it. I sort of am just like, well, I will see what happens, I guess, with like a lot of I don't even like the term AI because it's not. It's very weird I know it's a marketing thing. It's very weird to label a technology that takes a bunch of voice samples and then uses predictive processing to create a facsimile of a voice and call it like artificial intelligence. It's a very weird way. It's like a robo parrot. Like, I mean, it's like a robo parrot. It's weird that you'd look at a parrot and be like, wow, I look at this and I think intelligent. Like, but it kind of bums me out to think that like, I don't think in the near future we're going to be like, oh, they're going to a lot of like the big hype really high on their own supply, like AI trying to get people to invest bros are like, oh, you won't even need to pay actors or movies or anything. You won't need any. It'll just be like infinite entertainment forever. It could already do it. Look at AI Seinfeld and whatever. And I think it's kind of a real bummer to me that it does feel like there is a decent chance that within my lifetime, a lot of animated shows might just have generated voices. I don't know if that's. I mean, to some degree, I don't think it's going to go away entirely because I think that there are people who will just say, "Oh, I'm not going to watch that show," and there'll be a selling point of certain things to say, "No, we have real voice actors," But it's kind of a real bummer to me to think about, like, yeah, you could see these great voices and to know that, like, that might be something that's gonna just be so different or, like, almost gone. I mean, we'll see. I also, part of me is a little, I just don't want to give myself, like, false hope because a lot of stuff it just bums me out more than anything else. But part of me does think they were saying that about like self-driving cars like a decade ago. They were like 5 years out, all self-driving, and they're like, oh, this is harder than we thought. It's always that like last 5% where I feel like it's going to get to a point where someone's going to try and do the all AI cartoon show, and they're going to be like, this is more trouble than just using voice actors.
Yeah, I think
at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the Nicktoons are a great argument against that. All three of them.
Yeah,
because the voice acting across the board for Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy is so good, and you can synthesize a voice, you can make it sound like a certain person, but there's certain levels of inflection, choice, and comedic timing that you just can't teach a machine. And so I think there will be cartoons that use it, but it's going to be real cheap crap for babies.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I can't imagine any kid being that compelled by. They're just not going to laugh. It's not going to be funny.
Yeah. I do think that, I mean, you look at even the best stuff, and yes, I know. I mean, it's sort of like part of it when people talk about, like, to some degree it is going so fast. Although I saw something interesting and who knows, but that said that by assuming everything continues at the pace it is, at least something like ChatGPT will have read everything by like 2026, because the speed at which they can, and who knows what'll happen. I guess because people are like, oh, but then they'll just generate new training content. It's like, but that's where I think you probably start to end up with something less interesting, right? Because yeah, they can make new stuff. I don't know. Let's not get. I don't know enough about this, to be honest, and I know that I know I brought it up, so I don't mean to be like, but I know I'm so biased towards like kind of really wanting it to turn out that's like the self-driving car thing where it's gonna be like, oh, it turns out that last 5% really matters. But anyway, so I don't know. Should we get into some of the episodes?
Sure, we can talk about some of the individual episodes you picked.
Or was there something else you want to touch on?
No, I think that's fine. We should move on to some of these. So we sort of touched on the At the Movies episode already.
Yeah.
So that's a good place to start.
Yeah, that one, because it starts out, right, Tommy sees Reptar, and that's like a kind of a good example. He's like, well, he actually he does say Reptar correctly, and he's telling the other babies about it and how exciting it is. And he said, he's much more articulate to his parents than like almost ever is, where he goes, rubber! And they're like, yeah, rubber, let's go to the movies. I wonder if a little bit of it with the parents being so absorbed it's probably, I think this would have probably been too soon, but looking at it now, it kind of feels a little bit like a joke on like Disney adults, where you have like these adults who are like enraptured by this like stupid Care Bears cartoon, and they're acting like, oh, this is like the best thing ever. I like the joke that's at the end of it or whatever, where the kids like screw up. They mess up the concessions and everything gets all mixed up, and as like they're leaving, you overhear like a snooty sounding guy go, oh, that theater's popcorn tasted like Coca-Cola or soda pop or whatever. And you're like, oh, that's fun. That feels like a fun, like a real joke. Like, I don't know. I think part of the thing that people will sometimes be like, oh, it's just the babies doing baby talk. But like there's jokes in there too. Like, whichever non-union writer, storyboarder they had doing, adding those in. Yeah, it's also interesting, Godzilla, but in a sort of cultural, just kind of like a cultural, like Godzilla exists sort of way, where I feel like even back then there was so much less, there was so much more diversity almost in the kinds of different big action things, right? Like now it just feels like everything's, and I know this is not an original thought, right? But like everything's Marvel or DC or whatever, or Star Wars. And back then, like when people try and say like, well, it was always big blockbusters, and you're like, I don't know. It's a little different when you think of like, oh, Godzilla, this franchise that was, a Japanese franchise from the 50s, and Jaws and Indiana Jones. I know those are both Spielberg or Lucas, and then also Star Wars, and then like a couple superhero things, and then you had, it's almost like when they go through and they're looking at the different screens trying to find Reptar, it almost feels a little bit like you're like, no, see, there were like 7 different things that showed in theaters instead of kind of just 2.
Yeah, you're coming off here in 1991 too, about like some of the best years in the history of movies, like at 88 through 91, 93 corridor is just some of the most fun stuff ever put on screen. But they do treat Reptar sort of the way that you'd expect them to treat it, as if it was the MCU or Star Wars today, where it's like, this is the biggest entertainment thing out there, and it's Godzilla, which is like, Godzilla is fine. I don't have anything against it, but
it's that's what's so interesting, because it is like, it's kind of an inherently niche thing to some degree. Like people like Godzilla is almost so much more of like a cultural osmosis thing. Like I feel like everyone has seen so many parodies, especially in like Nick. I mean, growing up, that's one of those things you realize when you're like, how much of your notion of culture is formed by like the cartoons you watch growing up. I knew so much about the aesthetics of Godzilla because of stuff like Reptar, because of stuff like, I don't know, like a Looney Tunes or something where you have the little people running and like the mismatched dubbing voice, like, oh no, it is Godzilla, run away, or whatever, making fun of like messed up dubbing. I'd never seen a messed up dubbed Godzilla movie. I never saw a Godzilla movie. I knew about Godzilla because
I've still never seen one all the way through.
I also have not. I've heard Shin Godzilla is very good, but I haven't. There's someone who did. I remember this website a friend showed me, like a Tumblr or something, back in like, I don't know, 2011, called the Godzilla Remix Project, because for the 1998 Godzilla, which is the one where he just looks like a stupid dinosaur.
The Matthew Broderick one?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So Green Day released a version of Brain Stew that just has the Godzilla roar edited in as like part of the soundtrack, and so someone just edited the Godzilla roar into like different songs and called it the Godzilla Remix Project. And I remember seeing that and I was like, oh, haha, this is cute, this is like a fun idea. Someone's, in the heyday of fucking variations on a theme Tumblr, and and now it's variations on a theme Twitter, and who knows what'll happen when that finishes imploding. But I'm like, it's interesting that I was like, oh, this is fun. I can appreciate this, despite never having seen a Godzilla movie at all. I was just like, yeah, I know what Godzilla is. It's a big monster, and he roars, and this is funny because they're putting the monster roar in. Like, I watched Pacific Rim when it came out, and I enjoyed it, and I'd never seen a kaiju movie, but I was like, yeah. I mean, I'd seen anime, but I don't think I even watched too many, like one with the kaiju. Like, yeah, it's just a very interesting thing where I'm trying to think, and now I guess other stuff, like the same way I thought like a souffle, if you were too loud near a souffle, it would collapse, because that's like a thing that happens in cartoons. Or, quicksand, just all these things that were totally introduced via cartoons. And I was like, yeah, quicksand, that's a thing. You're not supposed to move in it. If you move, it gets worse. What a weird... It's not like they taught us that in school. We have quicksand safety courses. Like, that's just something... It's fascinating.
Yeah, I this has come up on this podcast a lot because it's about revisiting stuff from when you were young, especially cartoons, and anything that's real genre heavy. I realize a lot of it was like cartoons were almost these training wheels.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like a couple episodes ago, we did we did an episode on Fallen Angels, which is this noir anthology series, which is pretty cool. And my experience with noir before getting, in seeing adult versions of things, the actual, like, the Maltese Falcon and the Big Sleep and that stuff, was seeing cartoon characters put on a fedora and act like Humphrey Bogart. And, and that's true for noir. It was true for sci-fi. It was true for horror. Like, all of these different genres, I was getting filtered versions of through cartoon parodies that, like, when you saw the real thing, it felt like, okay, I already know all the tropes. I can truck with this.
Yeah, it's wild. It's just like, one of the examples that's always the funniest to me, and in retrospect, you're like, oh, of course, that makes sense. I never thought about it. Is that everyone thinks, oh, rabbits, they like to eat carrots. Carrots aren't good for rabbits. They don't specifically like it. The reason why Bugs has a carrot, you assume as a kid, I think, you're like, oh, rabbits must like carrots. That's why Bugs has a carrot. It's because he's doing like a Groucho Marx cigar thing with it all the time.
Right, and he can't have a cigar.
Yeah, so he just has a carrot, and you're like, that's so nuts to me to be like, oh, there was no associate. Or the other crazy one is that the whole reason why Nimrod, like, I remember as a kid, you see, like, you hear about, in Hebrew it's Nimrod, but you see like Nimrod, you're like, oh my God, there was a guy named Nimrod. That means idiot. The reason why Nimrod means idiot to a lot of people is because Bugs sarcastically called Elmer Fudd Nimrod. Be like, oh, look at you, great hunter. Like, oh, Nimrod. Same way you call someone Einstein when you're like sarcastically. He called him Nimrod, and a bunch of kids who didn't even know what was referencing were just like, oh, that must just mean idiot. That must be a word for idiot. Which is funny. I mean, you could imagine if Einstein wasn't so much better known, you could almost imagine a context where if someone had used it sarcastically, if kids had just only known it from Star Fox 64 or whatever, hearing Falco say it, then they'd be like, oh, Einstein, that must mean idiot. Speaking of, I don't know, is there anything else you want to talk about for the movie one?
No. Actually, I was going to say maybe this is a good segue into the nightmare one.
The Angelica's Baby.
Angelica's Baby. Yeah, that one.
Listen, I'm glad you're here. You can watch your brother while we go call the newspapers and tell them we've got the greatest baby in the world.
So you're the new baby, huh?
That's right. I'm the new baby. I'm the new baby, and you're the old baby, see? And you better get something straight right off the bat. There ain't room in this house for the both of us.
Mommy!
What's wrong?
The new baby, it talked to me. It said mean things to me.
Oh, that's ridiculous. You know babies can't talk.
Charlotte, you're right. It'll be perfect for the new baby.
Oh, by the way, we're moving the new baby into your room and giving him all your toys.
Huh?
Hey, what are you doing here, sister? I thought I told you to scram.
Ooh, nom.
I warned you to get out, but you wouldn't listen. Now I'm gonna have to teach you a lesson. You had your chance.
Yeah, that one is fascinating to me a lot of ways. So that's one that definitely left an impression on me as a kid. That freaked me out. The big baby, she has a nightmare about her potential baby brother. And that's one where there's a lot for me, I think, to dig in with that one. Aside from that being real creepy, so, she finds out, right, that they do like the kid version of a pregnancy test you can do, right, where her mom is holding a test tube and goes, it turned blue, it means we're having a baby. And so Angelica, of course, is worried about that. They have a joke I like when shows play around with like classic sitcom tropes or whatever, where Angelica says, oh, I have a friend, my friend, is having a baby brother, and my friend, I mean me, and my friend, and she says it, and, the typical sitcom trope is that the person you're talking to goes, well, I think your friend should try to feel a little better about this, or whatever, but Tommy just goes, yeah, that is tough. Good thing it's not happening to you. Which, like, that could be a Simpsons joke. I mean, that could be, like, it may have even been. That's, like, playing on a trope, of a classic sitcom trope and subverting it in a funny way. And then, they, of course, her Aunt Dee Dee says, oh, I heard your parents are having a baby. And Tommy goes, oh, wow. Now it is, whatever. They overplay it a little maybe, but like that's fun. And for a lot of kids, I mean, it is sort of interesting because like you probably saw another show maybe that had a character who pulls the oh my friend is this, but like I don't know, maybe not. They're subverting that trope, and it could easily be the first time a kid watching it has heard of that, has seen that trope in action. I'm sure TV Tropes has a stupid TV Tropes. My friend has a problem. It's probably called that. Let's see. Okay, yeah. I have this friend, and I'm sure it's got a real TV Tropes.
Oh, it probably goes all the way back to like the Honeymooners or something. It's,
yeah,
that's been around forever. And you're right. Like that is a great moment of like undercutting that trope. And this show, like you said, will surprise you by doing that here and there. It does present as being for babies, but this kind of stuff. One thing I noticed about animators is that they are very astute students of genre and tropes, and I think they have fun using the medium of animation to try and like play with that sandbox. And this episode is a great example of that. Like when they get into the actual like nightmare portion of it, when Angelica is freaking out, about this anxiety, what is really just an expression of her anxiety over possibly having a sibling. They let the animators kind of run wild and do what they want. Like for a show that already looks sort of weird, this gets into territory that they would revisit later in something like Real Monsters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean absolutely. And that was on the, maybe I was a little older. That was on the right side of scary for me, where I enjoyed that one. God, did Monsters Inc. rip off Our Real Monsters a little bit?
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know if they intentionally did it.
No,
I
mean it's
very
also
much.
one of those,
It's very much a similar concept of like, hey, the monsters under your bed have a life of their own.
Yeah.
Outside of scaring you. And like, I actually put that on for my son recently because he likes Halloweenish things. He likes monstery things. So he kept saying he wanted to watch Monsters. I'm like, okay, I'll show you that show, Real Monsters. He complained, but watched like a good 2 solid episodes of it, despite complaining that he supposedly didn't like it. But while it was on, like my wife turned to me and was like, "Did this come before Monsters Inc. or after Monsters Inc.?" I'm like, "Before." So we had the exact same thought. Because it's a monster school. It's more like Monsters University actually than it is like Monsters Inc. But
yeah, that's true. It is funny when kids will just be like, I want to watch, Dragon. And you're like, okay, just a noun. I mean, my niece accidentally. I was visiting my sister. And her niece is just playing around with the remote and managed to put on The Woman King on Netflix. It's like, her niece is a little over a year old. I just look over and it's just the year is 1780 whatever. The kingdom of Dahomey is under siege from the whatever empire. The other thing in this one, so they have a couple interesting things. One, and this is like such a CinemaSins ding or whatever, like or comic book guy, like, are we meant to believe? They have like Drew. He's distracted at one point because he's like, how are we gonna make this? I got to figure out. We're gonna have to budget more. And I'm like, I don't know if this is maybe some attempt to be a deliberate comment on like the pay gap or something. But you're like, her mom is like, her dad works also. Her mom is like a high-powered executive who's like got her own top office and flies off to Singapore for meetings.
Yeah, she even has a cell phone in 1991.
Yeah, and you're like, are they just paying her like 10% of what they're paying a male exec? It seems a little odd. I don't know if they just want him to be stressed and we're gonna have to make some cutbacks. And it's like, what's the point of working this much in a 1993 job or whatever in the Clinton boom years, and you're like can barely get by with a second kid, and you have this high-powered corporate job and an assistant you get to boss around, and I'm like, what is that? What it clashes a little. I know it's just one scene, but I'm like, I would assume that like, especially compared to like the Pickleses, who I don't even remember if Dee Dee works. And Stu is like a struggling inventor, and somehow they're paying their mortgage.
I was just gonna bring that up. Yeah. Like, Drew, is it? I can never remember Stu and Drew, but like Stu Pickles. I need to get a jingle for this podcast. It's like every time a wacky inventor shows up.
Yeah.
Because holy shit, I think we've come across over the course of the 27 episodes we've done. There's been at least like 10 or 11 wacky inventors here and there.
In the Chucky congested episode, it's kind of funny because his like stupid invention is a solar powered lawnmower, which partially feels like very of its time. When it's very interesting when you look at kind of the popular conception of the future and tech inventions, and I feel like some of the stuff where they were like, oh, flying cars, a pill that inflates into food and all this stuff. How much of it was like wrong, and then how much of the stuff that they like were like, ugh, solar power, that's for losers, and now it's like one of the most efficient, affordable forms of energy. And you look and you're like, even back then, a solar-powered lawnmower would probably make sense. Like, they have to, like, make it be like, oh, but the sun's out too much, it'll go crazy. But, like, you're outside when you're mowing the lawn. It probably doesn't need that much power. I bet that would make sense. I mean, now, the joke there is Chucky's dad goes, well, why wouldn't you just push it? Or why can't you just have a push mower? Which, I mean, that feels so dated. No one uses a push mower anymore. But, like, solar-powered lawnmower feels like it makes the most sense. But they have to be like, oh, what a crazy invention. It is part of it is that no one knew how cheap solar panels would become, because back then it's so cheap now that it doesn't make sense not to. But this one they need to cut back apparently, and she has a conversation with her mom where she's like, I don't think we should have a baby right now, and she's like, no, we are, and she calls that like psychiatrist, like Colin Fraser or whatever. I do like the joke of him telling her correctly, like, you have to understand that you're not the center of the world and other people exist too and they need to do this, and she throws out the TV. I mean, that's, again, that's a sort of Simpsons-esque sort of like, stupid TV, why aren't you being funny?
Right. It is that same joke. I just, you meant we should talk about that Chucky getting his nose fixed episode, which is interesting in that it implies that, like, oh, no wonder he sounds like that. He is actually stuffed up 99% of the time.
He's like terminally congested. Like, he has a congenital nasal anomaly that he's like, really suffering in every episode to a degree that you don't appreciate, I guess. Before we jump to that one, though, or to another one, I do want to say that the way that the Angelica one ends is a little wild, because they seem to imply, so either it's not totally clear whether it was just a chemical pregnancy or whether she miscarried, but to find out, to go, oh, we're actually not going to have a baby, and they're like sad, and she goes back to her room and she's like, yes.
I went to the doctor this morning, and it turns out I'm not going to have a baby after all.
You mean I'm not going to have a little brother or sister?
Well, not right now.
Gee, that's too bad, Mommy. I was just starting to think it would be nice to have a little baby around.
I'm sorry, Angelica.
Yes!
And that's a little nuts to me that they're like, they just put in like it ends with her celebrating that her mother, obviously she isn't aware of it, but like as a parent you see that and you're like, again, if you want to be all, again, CinemaSins comic book guy ding, presumably, if they're telling other people, it probably means she miscarried. If it was a chemical pregnancy, it probably would have been before when they would start telling other people, because they'd want to be sure. Obviously they could. I mean, they're telling, she's telling her sister-in-law. It's not like she's like sending out notices to everyone. But I can't say. I don't know if you would have the experience in this. I'd imagine you probably hold off on telling a potential sibling until it's past the point where it might be a chemical pregnancy, because I imagine you want to be pretty sure that's happening before you get them all riled up about however they're going to feel about that. So especially with the kid is young. So Angelica is supposed to be 3, and like our kids are 3 years apart, so we had to have that conversation with my daughter when she was 3 that she was going to have a little brother, and we definitely were like, we want to make sure we wait long enough, because it's going to be very hard to explain if we miscarry or this, falls through for, whatever reason, to try and backpedal that. Like, oh, guess what? You're not having a sibling. For a 3-year-old, that's a lot to take in. But Angelica is, of course, not written like a real 3-year-old. She's, she's, that's, they also never quite explain. I guess this is probably why the perennial, Angelica's, the other ones are dead. They're all, that's like the number one example of like stupid TV tropes online, whatever theory is. Oh, all the babies are dead and Angelica's the only one alive. I guess maybe the reason that arose is because the show doesn't really engage with the reality of, so she should be able to be like a baby interpreter. Like, she knows she can talk to babies, and she knows what's wrong. Like, and they don't do, in the Wild Thornberrys or whatever, Eliza keeps it a secret deliberately, I think, because she's worried. I think because she can't. I forget what it is. If they tell her that if like the spirit or whatever it is that told her that she can't, or if she's just worried they'll study her in a lab or whatever. It's wild. It's kind of wild. They're like, yeah, sure. This is a scene where her mom found out she miscarried, presumably, and they just have her being all excited about it. It is a little subversive, because you do think that the genuine ending is going to be her saying, wow, and I was kind of getting excited for it. And you're like, oh, she learned a lesson. But no, she didn't at all. She goes back to her room and she's psyched.
Yeah, she's pretty rotten on most levels. And you're right. Like, they don't lay down exactly, how the rules work in terms of are the babies talking fluently and the adults can't hear it? Or is it that they're speaking baby language to each other and it's just coming through to the audience as English so we understand it? And it's sort of like, it doesn't really matter. They talk when the adults aren't really around or noticing, and they have their adventures. Like, this is not one of those shows that needs to stand up to that level of scrutiny. Yeah. They can keep things kind of fluid. And yeah, Angelica walks between both, right? She can talk to the babies and she can talk to the adults, and that's just how it is. It doesn't need any more explanation than that. We should round down towards the end here. So I think this is a good time to maybe talk about the Passover episode. I thought that'd be a good place to end, because I know that there were things in there that it suggested that the Pickleses were Jewish, and certainly the Boris and Minka acting very Jewish. I recognize that as stereotypical Yiddish accents and stuff. But this episode laid it out explicitly. Like, yes, it is Passover. They are celebrating this holiday, and we are going to do our version of the Ten Commandments in 15 minutes.
This is the life. More wind, slaves! Anything you say, Your Royal Pharaohness.
Just then, Pharaoh saw something in the bulrushes.
Hey, what's that in the bulrushes? Slaves, paddle me over there. Hi, I'm Moses. Pleased to meet you. I'm Pharaoh. I run this place. Where are you from, Moses? Up the river, I guess. Well, come on, I'll show you around.
And so Pharaoh took Moses to the royal palace and showed to him all the riches of the kingdom.
And I really like it. They do a very adept job at condensing that story and fitting it into the Rugrats world.
Yeah, it's also they have the whole thing with them being locked in, and with Stu having to lead part of the seder. Don't lock the door or don't close the door. That also lives in my head. But I think it's not just that it's not just that they have an episode on Passover or whatever. I think it's seeing specific aspects of tradition, like seeing a seder portrayed, where growing up it's something I experienced every year. It's something that, to me, even though I'm not really religious anymore, it's something that's so important to me culturally that I think going forwards I'd want kids to have a part of that, maybe a shorter version. But it's funny because they have in the Hanukkah one, Angelica just wants to see the Christmas specials or whatever, and it feels pretty meaningful to be like, oh, I've not seen someone address this thing in my life, and to think that I know some people still do kind of Christmas culturally. We didn't at all, and we didn't do Halloween at all. We would stay home and just give out candy to people who showed up. I mean, we did Thanksgiving, but that's pretty irreligious. I mean, a lot of people would say that Christmas and at least especially Halloween or or even Valentine's Day, whatever, all pretty irreligious now. But I don't know. I think it's obviously a lot of people from different backgrounds can understand it, but I think it's tough to fully understand what it's like to not be a part of the overarching culture to some degree, right? I mean, we always we consider ourselves American, and we celebrate Independence Day and 4th of July and Thanksgiving. But there's really something special to a kid about being able to see that. And, like, I would want kids, to them. I mean, I'm not sure which would be I don't think, like, a Ramadan Rugrats would probably be appropriate. But, like, I don't know, Eid al-Fitr, I'm sure there's a most appropriate ceremony, or, I just, it's a really cool thing to have as a kid, and I'd want people to have that. And it's always, when we talked about that before, and people talk about the, like, diversity, forced diversity, this and that arguments, it's, like, even more ridiculous when you're talking about it with, like, kids, right? Because you're like, no, it's just good, it's positive, because your kids will meet other types of people, and they should have some sense that not everyone is like them. They will do better in the world. Even from, like, a selfish perspective, they will better be able to navigate the world if they are aware that there are other types of people. I had a joke in stand-up that I could maybe revisit with sort of mixed results, not the strongest one. But when I was younger, I would sometimes have people say, in the South, growing up, they'd be, so, I know Jesus isn't your Messiah, but what do you think of him? Which I say is weird, because that's like someone saying, so what do you think of my uncle? No, you must have an opinion. He's very important to me, right? Like, right. The idea that someone would just be like, I don't have strong feelings. Like, it was very funny. Like, we weren't, I just didn't have, I wasn't like, oh, I'm so upset that we can't celebrate Christmas, or, oh, Jesus seems so cool. I just didn't have strong feelings about this stuff. And I think if you the more you can see other types of people, the more you can understand, like, oh, everyone has a different perspective. And I don't know, I think I would have been into, like, other kinds of cultural stuff being shown. So I don't know how much it had an impact people who didn't have this connection, if they saw that. They were like, if some kid growing up in Idaho now gets to have the same connection as someone going to a public school in Far Rockaway or something. But I don't know. It's neat. It was neat to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's neat to me, too, to be sort of seen in that way and to be represented on TV. I was 13 when this came out. This would have been 1993, so this would have been the year I got bar mitzvahed. It would have been the year that Schindler's List came out. It would have been the year that I actually took a trip to Russia. And I'll never forget that, while on the trip, my mom was like, oh, well, we would like to see if there are synagogues we could go see while we're here. And the tour guide basically was like, don't do it. Not to be mean to us, but to be protective.
Yeah.
And, those kind of very formative experiences in my young Jewish life, to turn on Rugrats and see, what these normally this very light, fluffy show about babies having misunderstandings about, what machines are and how they work. To have this episode where they sit down as a family and tell this story, and it's not presented, it's not, this is not weird, it's not hyper comedic, it's not any, it just is. They're just having a seder.
Yeah.
So just presented very straightforward. And also that the most boring part of the seder, which is Stu just going like, okay, this is the parsley. We do this with the right. That gives way to the Grandpa Boris having everybody just enraptured by the story of Passover. It's like, this is what it's about. This is about passing on this tradition, this moment in time from our heritage, and why it's so important and impactful today. And you watch that kind of a transition happen from the elders to the kids. And it was just, this is really impactful, and something just sort of uniquely special about this show that made it feel like, yes, being a kid, even if you're not a baby, is still very weird and alienating all the time. And it's okay to feel adrift that way, because eventually, with the help of caring adults, you are going to make your way to where you need to be.
Yeah.
Andrew, any final thoughts on why you think Rugrats has endured? Because we haven't even talked about there's spin-off series and a reboot now, and movies, it has endured. And what do you think it is about the show that makes it endure?
I think I think part of it is that it's pretty well pitched for kids, and adults can tolerate it. Like I said, I mean, part of it's just the fact that the people who grew up with it are now. It's part of the nostalgia cycle, which is it's got its ups and downs, right? I mean, I have a friend who was writing on the new Rugrats. I actually haven't gotten the chance to check it out. I'm not sure how it is, but I'd definitely be curious to see. It's funny because they did the movies, which I watch, and it is a little, I mean, it doesn't make sense to really talk about jumping the shark or whatever, but you get to the point where the first movie, they're lost in the woods, right? Which is a pretty high stakes thing for, oh yeah, okay. Normally they get lost, they go on adventures. This one, they're lost in the woods. There has to be a search party. Tommy gets a new baby brother. That's huge. Those are all huge stakes. I still love the song from that one. Take me there. I want to go there. You can watch that music video where they're all dancing around the Rugrats house. And then in 2, they're like, all right, well, they're going to France. And not only are they lost in France, which in and of itself would be would be raising the stakes. But they are end up fighting in the mechs, like a reptar mech and a snail mech. And you're like, that's pretty wild to put these babies in, but okay. And and then they did All Grown Up, which I did like. Which I mean, the smart thing about that, I guess, was that they realized, well, they did a special, which was interesting because you're like, oh, what would they be like as a little older? And then they turned into a show. And to some degree, it's a little silly because the whole point is that they're babies. And so it's a little weird to be like, well, what if they were not babies? But I think probably one reason it worked as well as it did is because the people who grew up, who were little kids when they were kids, are now around that age. And they're like, oh, I can kind of relate to the stuff that they're going through now. There's just, I think there's a real character to it. The Klasky Csupo, I mean, you see it in the Passover episodes and everything where they're these, it's this immigrant family and they're coming at something with a certain perspective and a certain approach. And there's, I think all the characters in it are pretty distinct kind of types. And it manages to incorporate a lot of stuff that you appreciate more when you're an adult. You see, the Dr. Lipschitz, who the kind of parenting guru and his advice, and just stuff that you don't fully appreciate until you're like, okay, it feels kind of timeless, and it also feels very much like what it would be like maybe being a young parent in the early 90s, at the end of history,
right?
Raising these babies.
Well, cool, Andrew. I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a real treat to revisit the show, which I probably haven't watched since the early 90s, back when it was on. Where can people find you if they want to find you?
Yeah, so definitely go to andrewtavin.com. That's all ANDREW, T as in Tiger, AVIN as in Nancy. You can see where I'm doing shows and other projects. You can also listen to the House of House podcast as a House Rewatch podcast. We are getting towards the end of season 2. Lots of very fun stuff there because it is a bonkers show, and we got some great guests we've had on. And you could also listen to Sound Snacks, which is spelled with a Z instead of the last S. And that is an audio sketch show that I co-wrote with Casey Turgeson. And that is, it's got some great voices of people like Alex Edelman, Sarah Hartshorn, Griffin Newman. For anyone who likes Blank Check, you can listen to him on there. And it's 4 episodes. They're each 15 minutes. You could listen to it all real quick after this podcast. Go do it. Thank you for having me. And social media, all Andrew Tavin, all one word.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on again, and please go check all that stuff out. To do a quick bit of admin on our side, if you like this show, do what you do when you like a podcast, rate it highly, tell your friends. And also, if you have feedback on this episode or some of our other episodes that are recent, I admit I'm recording this one and another real close together, so I'm not sure which one comes out first. So you either just heard our episode where we did our top 10 Beatles songs, or you're about to hear our Beatles revisit. We also recently did that one on Fallen Angels, DuckTales, Saved by the Bell, My So-Called Life we just did. So if you have feedback on any of that stuff or our upcoming episodes, which include... Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. We're talking about doing Batman 89, which will be awesome. If you have thoughts on those, tweet them to @NostalgiumPod on Twitter, or find us on Instagram @NostalgiumArcanum and message us there. And until next time, that is one more entry in the Nostalgium Arcanum.
After crossing the freeway, base jumping off a cliff, and dodging bullets in a gang war, we finally found my Reptar doll!
Tommy! What are you doing in the street?
Oh, thank God. They've been lost for hours. Where were they?
Stu, a word. What the Stu?
I'm sorry. The babies escaped, and
Escaped? They're babies, you sackless moron!
I was downstairs working on a new toy, and they just...
Oh! A new toy! Never mind then!
Dee Dee, if you keep ridiculing my work, I swear to God...
What? You'll hit me? Ooh, you're such a man!
Dee Dee, stop!
I'll be the man! Stu, I'm the man!
What a divorce.